Welcome to Under the Sod. Today I will be covering the creepypasta, the skinwalker.
My father told me a story once. I'll never forget it, for a few reasons. I think it's the first story he ever told me as a child. It's also the story of how my grandfather died. But honestly, that isn't the reason. You hear stories on TV, or sometimes you overhear something in a public place. People talk about ghosts and aliens, and you think to yourself, that ain't real. They're making it up, or they're mistaken, or they're crazy, or something like that. You just can't believe it. That is, until something happens. Something that brings it all together, connects the dots in a way you didn't think of before. Maybe it happens to you, or maybe you hear the same story, again and again, from different people. It doesn't take long for the world to become a lot bigger than you thought it was. That's not what my father called it, of course. He's never used the internet in his life. He wouldn't know what the online community had taken to calling it. When he chose to call it something other than it or that thing, he called it a skinwalker, after an old Cherokee tale his grandfather told him. But I'll tell you the story, the way he told it to me. We were out hunting one night, in the woods surrounding the dairy farm in Ohio where we lived at the time, he'd tell me. We were tracking coyotes. We'd kill them for $50 a skin. They'd kill calves sometimes. We'd do it every night because we needed the money. Sometimes, while we were out, we'd come on a deer and kill it. Our landlord didn't mind, and it could feed our family for a few nights and save us some money. Anyway, we were done making our rounds and heading home, walking cause we didn't have a car or four-wheeler back then. We'd cut through the woods. That's when we came upon it. Blood, everywhere. Splattered on the trees, in the grass, in the creek, everywhere. At first, we figured it was a pack of coyotes. We'd seen how, sometimes, when they weren't able to scavenge for whatever reason, they'd start hunting deer or cattle out of desperation. The worst was when they bred with feral dogs. But this wasn't like that. You see, when a pack of dogs, wolves or coyotes attack something, they do it right. They'll pick off one that's weak, sick, or old, or just small. They'll hunt it, draw it into a corner, someplace it can't get out of, and they'll run it right to the biggest one, the alpha. And that deer will never see that alpha. It might hear it, but it won't see it. All of a sudden its throat will be torn out, and it'll drop dead. It's quick, and it's clean. That wasn't what happened here. Something had come upon a group of deer. Coyotes won't attack a group. Wolves wouldn't either. They'd get too much of a fight. There were 3, I think. 3 bodies, just torn apart. You'd see a head or a torso here, a leg there. Predators don't do that. They don't leave scraps behind. Whatever had done this hadn't done it for food. It had done it for fun. But we didn't know that at the time, of course. We just saw a bunch of carcasses and figured it's something we had to take care of. I remember my dad telling me to go home, that he thought it was the work of a pack of feral dogs. But I wasn't leaving him, and I damn sure wasn't hiking through 2 miles of woods alone, in the dark, with nothing but a .22 and a pocket knife. I was only 13 at the time, so a .22 rifle was the only gun I could reliably use. Dad had the shotgun, and I wasn't going anywhere without it or him. It took me a while to convince him, but finally we began tracking whatever did that. It wasn't hard, either. We just followed the blood. Either that thing bled a deer before it got away, or it dragged one for a mile. I don't know. What I do know is that I'd never seen my dad scared before that night. We started hearing the most horrible sounds. Now, I've been in a lot of woods in my life, and I've been all over the world, but I ain't never heard noises like I heard that night. I heard things screaming. I heard deer, fox, rabbits, raccoons, and birds, all of them afraid of something and hightailing it. Keep in mind, this is maybe 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning. Except for the fox and some birds, nothing was supposed to be awake at that hour. But they weren't just awake, mind you. They were on the run. That night, I saw flocks of birds flying straight into trees trying to escape something. We came upon a pack of coyotes, and nearly shot a couple thinking they had their eyes on us, but then we saw they were running in from someone, Nothing toward us. They didn't even notice us and went right past. Then some deer did the same. Then some rabbits, squirrels, and foxes. Even a couple of wild hogs. These critters were supposed to be hunting each other, and the only thing they cared about was getting as far away from there as possible. We should have put two and two together, that maybe whatever we were tracking wasn't something we were supposed to see, and wasn't something we could kill. To this day, I don't know why we didn't just go home. I guess we were curious. I think that was my dad's nature, to go toward trouble, to fight. And being aware of the things my father did during the war, I figured it was best to stay by his side. We finally reached an open valley. It was normally a soy field, but it wasn't in season, so it was just flat dirt. That's when we saw the tracks. Animals fleeing the forest had leveled everything in their path. But where that deer blood was, nothing had taken a single step. It was like whatever was responsible had left it for us to find. The tracks were shallow. Whatever it was couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds, but that didn't mean much. A bobcat weighing 40 pounds soaking wet can tear out your throat if you ain't careful. The fact this thing was on the lighter side just meant it was probably quick and was going to be tough to hit. So we followed the tracks, and it didn't take us long to find where they led. There's an old schoolhouse that sits on the top of a hill. Half of it had been ripped out by a tornado, but nobody lived there, not for a long time. Sometimes we caught homeless people in there, or drug addicts looking for a safe place to shoot up. We figured maybe that was it. Maybe it was some sick kid riding a high. But we didn't think that for long. When we got to within 50 yards, we heard a noise. A sort of screech made up of two different sounds. One was high-pitched, and another was a low growl. It was making both sounds, at the same time, if that makes any sense. We approached to within 20 yards, and we heard another sound, different this time. I remember thinking that it sounded like paper being torn apart, while someone was swinging water back and forth in a bucket. Dad looked at me, knelt down, and whispered. He told me I had to stay behind him, because we're about to corner our prey. Any animal will fight when it's cornered, especially a predator. But we can tell by the tracks that there's only one. He tells me it's probably a single feral dog, most likely rabid. The plan, he said, was to sneak up on it while it was eating, shoot it, and then keep shooting it till it didn't move anymore, then slit its throat. And if it got to Dad, it was my job to shoot or stab it to get it off him. So he walked up with me right behind him, just a tad to his side, so I can see what it is. I wish to this day I hadn't. It was leaning over a carcass, tearing off its flesh, and throwing what it didn't nibble at aside. There was blood all over the brick, glistening in the moonlight. It was pale white, and looked a little like a man, but not quite human. It had arms and legs like ours, but it sat like a monkey, hunched over. And its hands weren't normal, it had long fingers with claws at the end.
Oh, it looks like we've ran out of time. Part 2 will be out very soon. Make sure to like and subscribe if you love horror, and leave your thoughts of this video in the comments. Have fun sleeping tonight.